Hello guys, welcome back, or welcome if you're new, it's Christian from Emotions in Wine. Today, back to France, which we talked about a few weeks ago, and second time we speak about Chardonnay. So the most prestigious white grape in the world from Burgundy, and I want to showcase some other Burgundies, lesser known or known but still affordable, value for money in a way, of course, related to the place where they come from, is France and is Burgundy, so cannot be cheap. But it's still possible to drink good Burgundy, even reds, but we are talking about whites, at affordable prices. Of course, higher than normal. So let's start. Burgundy is big, is quite long, and then there is a separate part. So Chablis and Grand Auxerrois are northwest, as you can see, compared to the rest of Burgundy. So a separate part, and it's close to Loire Valley, so almost in the middle of France, almost south of Paris. So it's quite distant. The grapes are the same. By the way, it's not just Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. You have even other minor like Aligoté, white, Gamay, red, plus others. But of course, the focus is on Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And I picked for purpose Chablis area, which is more known, but still interesting, and is the extreme north of Burgundy, and then the extreme south, Mâconnais. But you have the Côte d'Or, the most famous, where everything is, all the famous wines spoken about, and very expensive nowadays. Côte d'Or is divided in Côte de Nuit, the northern part, and Côte Beaune, the southern part. All the famous crus and everything, but still, even there, you can find entry levels or similar, very good and affordable. My great pick is Haute Côte de Nuit, so the high hills of the Côte de Nuit, and there you have great value for money wines. Of course, other than those, when you go to village or cruise, it's very expensive. Then there is Côte Chalonnaise, and the extreme south is Mâconnais. So Mâcon is the main village there. Their majority is regional appellation or village, but some premier crus also. Is also not much of the soil that is pretty much similar, but the climate, so overall the terroir is a bit different in this southern part, and especially if we compare to Chablis, which is much more inner, so it will be interesting. And we will see not entry wines, but already a bit more at affordable prices. So we have Domaine Laroche, Chablis Saint-Martin, 2023, 12.5 alcohol, and Domaine Guerrin, Fuisse, Vieilles, so old wines, 2023, 13.5 alcohol. So if you are interested to see the other video about Chardonnay, the link is below. It was Alto Adige, so in Italy, as an alternative to Burgundy. Of course, their prices are more affordable. Here, let's see what I can propose you. I said this is a selection. Saint Martin is the name. Is selection from the vineyards, while this one is old vines. So already a step further up. So Domaine Laroche is an abbey. The monks already 1,000 years ago making wine there, but Laroche family is about 200 years. So anyway, quite long history. Environmental friendly, medium large, almost 100 hectares. In Chablis are also normal. There you have more acreage. Petit Chablis is the entry, then in Chablis, and then you go up with the selection or Premier Cru, etc. So this is a Chablis selection. So third step, let's say. Around 200 meters is completely different from the rest of Burgundy in soil, beside the climate being further north. So this is Chimerigian marl. So marl, calcareous clay, not that hard usually. On top of that, in this case, there is fossils, because it was the bed of the sea in the old days. So this is very characteristic of Chablis. Besides the marl, there is the fossils. So the minerality here is even more pronounced. And there is a bit of also chalk, which is, because neighboring is Sancerre, so in Loire Valley, which is famous for chalk, and also here you find a bit. So further enriching the minerality of the wines. Of course, then it's quite cool. So alcohol level usually is this kind, 12.5 similar, and more straightforward wines. But we will see the winemaking that gives some more. So colors, quite similar, slightly richer the second one, the Fuisse, a bit more intense yellow. Here there is still a green rim, which is making sense for Chablis. So environmental friendly, even if they have quite big production, they are attentive to everything that they can. It's an historical winery, so it's quite relevant. So here there is a selection from the plots, and then also the winemaking is a bit different because they do 6 months on fine lees, as we spoke last week. Link below for Luka Krajancic, the post ship master in Croatia. Here the similarity, also on fine lees for 6 months. So as I said already, to give more creaminess and complexity to the wine. And they use steel and big casks used, so not giving, but for micro oxygenation for sure help. So it's already a bit more because usually the regular Chablis is no fine lees and no oak at all. I would say classic Chablis with a bit more. We will see that the wines are very different because it's not just the terroir and the climate, is also the style. As you've seen here, you will see the difference for the other one. So quite straightforward fruit, mineral, but so far not that intense. So it's white fruit mostly. Usually you have also a flinty on the mineral side. So far I don't find it. And it's touch of creamy also on the nose. That is due to the fine lees. Of course, here we're not talking about outstanding wines, in particular Chablis, unless you go to the cruise. But interesting wines with a relatively affordable price. It's not too sharp even. Okay, 23, so they have already 1 year more, but still, with Chablis you could, but it's not. It's still fresh, good minerality on the palate, good length, perfect aperitif, this kind of wine, but of course with seafood, light dishes I would say. And it's touch of fruit, touch of mineral, the freshness is the most relevant, so very pleasant, and already quite well balanced, so perfectly drinking. Because some very young Chablis can be very sharp for palates not used to so much to that kind of acidity. It's quite north, so of course there is cooler. Complexity is okay, it's not super, it's decent. It's changing a bit, but not that much. Yeah, more or less there so far. I will do a final round at the end to let them breathe a bit in the glasses. Yeah, very pleasant, very pleasant. So it has something more than a normal Chablis, but still not big complexity, at least so far. And this will not show much more later on. So, Famille Guerrin, Puy Fuisse. So, Puy and Fuisse are two villages. That's the reason of the name. So, all that area is under Puy Fuisse, not far from Mâcon. Mâcon is doing regional appellation. So, there you have a lot of cheap wines. If you go for a normal Mâcon, usually it's very affordable. This is the most interesting part of Mâconnais, and is a specific one where there are also Premier Cru, and there is this famous rock. I recommend to see at least their website because it's a beautiful place. It's a bit different from Côte d'Or because you have this rock really evident with vineyards all around steep slopes, So beautiful place. And they are there in Vieilles village. But of course, they do some other appellations, so they have vineyards a bit spread around. They have 14 hectares. So it's a family, 100 years basically, it was 1926, so in a few months. So for generation, environmental friendly, indigenous, so very attentive, very careful, and they have a good heritage of older vines. That's why they decided to do this old vines, Vieilles wine. And there, so it's typically Burgundian, so limestone clay, but the landscape is a bit different because you have even 300-400 meters some vineyards around this rock, while in Côte de Beaune and Côte de Nuit, most of the vineyards are lower. Hot Côte are the only parts higher, this kind of altitude. It's also good because here is a bit more south, so a bit warmer, so being a bit higher is better. So completely different. First, climate. Second, a bit the soil, of course, quite different from the Chablis that I said is very specific. And they use barriques, but only for the vinification. After that, they go on fine leaves, but about a year, so much longer, but in still. So the oak is really in the vinification to give a bit more complexity, and is anyway a classic in all the Côte d'Or, Côte Chardonnay. Very little wines are unoaked in this part, while in Chablis you have majority unoaked. In fact, nose completely different. Here you have riper fruit, more yellow, touch of spiciness immediately, a feeling of roundness, creaminess. So there, of course, more minerality pronounced. Here, more the other things. The mineral is not the first thing that comes out. Very pleasant, very pleasant. I have good memories of these appellations. Of course, alcohol is a bit higher. Here is a bit warmer. So even if you think about the classic Bourgogne Blanc or Haute Chardonnay or other more important in Côte de Nuit or Côte de Beaune, these tend to be a bit rounder normally. Of course, has less aging potential. The distance is not huge, but it's a bit warmer anyway. Yeah, also here not huge complexity so far, but more than the other. The fruit, touch of spicy, the creamy, bit of mineral, so indeed more. Of course, the oak helps in that also. Completely different, of course, quite balanced already. The color already indicating that warmer climate and the use of oak. So you have more roundness. Of course, still good freshness. Touch of the spicy giving a bit of bitter. And nice depth. Is more food friendly, but of course it's fine also for aperitif. But the other is more on the sharper side, even if not that much, as I said. This is more on the roundness. They are both very interesting and very different. Worth wines. The Chablis in France is 20 minus. I paid 24, something like that, here. While the Fuisse, I paid almost 27, and in France is 20 plus. So not cheap, of course, but you can have better wines in other regions for the same price. But we are talking about Burgundy, so you can still have nice wines from Burgundy at affordable price. That is the point. And these are not the entry. So giving you something more. Of course, they don't have huge complexity. They are not great wines. They are nice wines. Yeah, I was expecting more for the old vines, deep rooted, so a bit more minerality in particular, and a bit more depth. So far, the minerality is not that pronounced. So a bit more complex than the other, but not too much either. Length is good. Still good freshness. but it's more the touch of the spicy that give you the dryness than the freshness. But of course, also compared to the other, acidity in the Chablis is much higher. So two completely different things. Last round. Okay, changing a bit now more on the mineral typical of Chablis. Yeah, much more marking the minerality now. Still the white fruit. Touch of floral also now. So not bad, also the complexity is a selection anyway. Nice wine overall. They are quite famous, also for the history and the size. You can find them a bit everywhere. This one less, of course, I didn't check much in detail, but they are about 100,000 bottles, I guess, so you can find, but of course less easily. Yeah, very pleasant, cleaning, not that long, but it's a nice wine. Nice wine, doing the perfect job. Okay, now a bit more those classic notes that I find in most Burgundy related to the minerality. Touch flinty here, should be more flinty, the Chablis, but even here there is a hint, even smoky touch. Yeah, very nice, very nice. So getting better. So the complexity here is quite good. So now seeming fresher from the nose. Yeah, it's also that I drink it after the other. So of course this looks rounder because the other is a bit more acidic, but it's perfect, perfect. Not that huge depth. For a Vieilles, I was expecting a bit more on that, but it's very nice. Doing its job, value for money is worth. So two nice expressions of Burgundy, still affordable. If you like Chardonnay and Burgundy in particular, you can still find some parts of the region offering value for money. I hope you enjoy, guys. Like, subscribe, comment, please. Help us to grow. And see you next time. Salute.